Okay, I'm Larry with DMG Corporation. We're the local Marley representative. I brought along Spencer. He's with the factory. He's Marley factory gentleman. He came out here just to help us out with this training. Basically, we are the manufacturer's rep. We provided the towers to South Coast Mechanical, and basically supported them on any problems, any issues that happen. I'll let Spencer take it away with the training.
All right, thanks, Larry. So what we're going to do today is go through a couple of the tower components for those of you who may not have been on towers much in the past, and then after that we'll dive into some maintenance features and things to consider when you're on and around these towers. So real quickly, the towers specifically that you guys received recently was this cross-flow tower on the left. As Aaron mentioned, you have an open cooling tower, and within open cooling towers you have cross-flow towers and you have counterflow towers. So cross-flow is this one on the left. That is when the air is traveling across the direction of the water. So, and I'll explain this in the components, but water is falling down the tower and air is traveling across the direction of the water travel.
You want to wear the mic or speak up?
Yeah, let's put the mic up.
Okay, I can do that.
We're going to walk around a little bit. Technical difficulties. We can put that in the pocket.
Testing, testing. Is that good? Am I dialed in? Testing, testing. Check, 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 check. Hello, hello. Testing. And do you want me to start over or just continue?
Yeah, maybe we should.
Okay. All right. All right. Hello again. My name is Spencer. I'm with Marley Cooling Towers. Today we are going to be discussing your cooling towers that you recently received for USC. I will talk about the type of cooling tower that you have on site, along with the tower components within that cooling tower for those of you who may not be on towers very often. And then we will dive into some of the maintenance aspects of these cooling towers, things to consider. So real quickly, within open cooling tower world, there's two main types. There's cross-flow towers and there's counterflow towers. A cross-flow tower, which is the tower that you received at USC, has the direction of water traveling across the direction of air. So air comes in these air inlets here, and they travel across the water that is falling down the fill. And I'll explain what fill is in just a second. A counterflow tower is a tower that has air travel in the bottom of the tower. It travels upwards counter to the direction of the falling water. So you can literally think with your hands, air traveling up, water traveling down, counter directions. So we'll primarily be talking about maintenance on the crossflow tower, since that's what you guys recently received and that's what you'll be doing most of your work on. So within the crossflow tower, we'll run through these components here. First off, you have mechanical equipment. So your mechanical equipment is what's going to be drawing the air. This is an induced draft fan, which means there's an axial. You actually have fan blades that are drawing air through and up out of the tower. A forced draft fan, which some of you may or may not be familiar with, has a centrifugal blower that's actually pushing air up and out of the tower. Your tower is a axial induced draft fan, just like it's pictured here on the left. With your mechanical, you have your fan, you have a gear reducer, and you have your motor. Those are your three main mechanical components, and you'll be doing maintenance on all three of those. You also have your water distribution up here, and this can either be with HC valves for direct inlet, or we can pipe from the bottom of the tower or the side of the tower and have internal piping that will dump into your water distribution basins. Once the water gets in those distribution basins, we have an array of nozzles in what we call the hot water basin. The purpose of the nozzles is to properly distribute the water across the fill media, which I'll discuss in just a second. The good thing about crossflow is you have gravity-fed basins, which means that your pumps only require to get the water up into those basins. From there, gravity and the size of the nozzles that we select for your tower will properly distribute it amongst the fill. The fill here, which is this black PVC mesh-looking material, this is really where your thermal transfer is happening. So a lot of people will consider the fill it probably is the most important component within the cooling tower. Your fill is where your water comes into contact with your air, cooling the water for the purpose of the system. Now, the fill, what you'll find is when you talk about maintenance with fill, it's mostly going to be cleaning and just observing the condition of the fill. Cooling towers are known to be air scrubbers. You basically have a lot of air coming in contact with water, and in Los Angeles, we all know that the air isn't so clean out here. So these cooling towers, if they're not properly maintained, can get pretty dirty. So it's good to observe your fill every once in a while and see if it needs to be brushed or cleaned. We also have, with integral to the fill, we have louvers, which is the first point of contact for the air. The purpose of the louvers is to keep the water inside the tower. So without louvers, the water would just fall out of the fill. It may fall in the basin. It may fall out of the tower completely. So the louvers, which are connected to the fill, are angled such that water that falls on the louvers will be directed back inside the tower. On the other side of the fill, you have drift eliminators. What do you guys think the purpose of the drift eliminators is? It is to eliminate drift. That's what drift eliminators do. So yes, not get the motor wet is one purpose. But one thing that these fans are pretty powerful, and they can actually pull up some of that water that's in the system and blow it out into the air. It's not a huge problem for air quality, but really where we run into problems with drift is when you have parking near these cooling towers, or or even a doctor's office. You have doctors who have nice cars. They get little specks on their cars. They need to be cleaned. They get upset. They call us. So to avoid that, we put these drift eliminators in, which are triple pass, so that water cannot escape the tower and get outside the fan. Then at the bottom, the water will travel down the fill, get cool, and at the bottom it will reach a water collection basin, or what we call a cold water basin is another term for it. This is where you'll have a lot of your liquid level controls, and this is where the water will be pumped out to the rest of the system. So it is a pretty simple machine, but there's also a lot to consider from a maintenance standpoint. So I believe that Larry handed all of you a maintenance schedule. So these few sheets here are taken directly out of the O&M manual that you received. So I think, Larry, if you actually want to come on up here just so we can bounce back and forth, things that you've seen in the field, things that I've seen in the field. I think we're going to walk through some of these maintenance procedures, and if you guys have questions, please feel free to ask. We're here for you.
Do you want to talk about the catwalk area? The inner.
Yeah. So I didn't talk about structure at all, but the main maintenance area for the crossflow towers, and you guys should be very happy that you have a crossflow tower to do maintenance on instead of a counterflow tower, because the crossflow towers have an access door right here, and from this access door you will have a plenum walkway catwalk basically. From there you'll be able to access your drift eliminators, you'll be able to access your fill, you'll be able to access your mechanical, your motors, your gear reducer. You'll be able to do a lot of your work within that mechanical access platform. With the counterflow, all the components are stacked on top of each other, so it's much more difficult to find points of entry to do maintenance. So you'll spend a lot of your time inside that maintenance access area, which actually brings me to a good point. Before we can talk about maintenance, what do we have to talk about? Safety, right? So the really most important thing with safety when it comes to cooling towers is make sure that you lock out, tag out before you do any work inside the cooling towers. These cooling towers are OSHA approved. All the maintenance guardrails we have are OSHA approved, but some consider it to be a confined space, and so make sure that you lock out, tag out before anyone enters the tower. We also recommend that you don't run water over the fill while people are in there doing maintenance. A lot of maintenance guys will kind of grumble at that and say, oh, you're not gonna get hurt from water, right? But that's another precaution to keep in mind, is to not be in there when the tower's running at all, both mechanically and hydraulically. And also to start kind of the maintenance discussion, one thing that we like to recommend to everyone is really, if you are out having eyes on the tower weekly or maybe bi-weekly, you are doing better than probably 80% of maintenance crews out there. And the reason you want to be out there regularly, even if you're not going in and really looking at the gear reducer or checking the oil level, is it will give you a gauge of what your tower's doing. You'll be able to hear it. You'll be able to see, okay, this is what the tower sounds like. Go back the next week, it sounds a little different. That's something to look into. You can see the buildup in the hot water basin, how much, not mold, but how much debris is building up in there. And so you come back the next week, you notice there's a lot more. Okay, maybe we got a problem with our chemical treatment. Maybe our sweeper system's not working correctly. So it's good to be out there regularly, even if you're not doing any technical work, just to see what your cooling tower is doing. Cooling towers are often neglected, similar to pumps. And over time, if you don't look at your tower, don't do any work on it, you'll come back and you'll be looking at an expensive replacement. So I think what I'd like to do is probably go through some of these items here in this handout. So let's just start. I already talked on page 1, you have the always shut off electrical power. We discussed that. And then it goes through some items to consider weekly, monthly, every 3 months, and semi-annually. Before we go through these, I want to make note to page, let's see here. Page 29, if we could flip there real quick. This will be your cooling tower maintenance Bible, so to say. So this is your maintenance schedule for your cooling tower. This will be in your O&M manual. So that basically tells you everything you need to do on a monthly basis, semi-annually basis, and also annually basis. So read through these things. If you have questions on these, again, both Larry's in town. He'd be able to help you out if you don't know how to do these. We'll walk through a few of them, but we're not going to hit high points on each one. So, but this is going to be a great reference for all of you. All right, back to page 1. All right, so on page 1, if you go down where it says weekly, inspect for bacterial growth and general operation conditions. This is what I was just mentioning before. If you're not out there with eyes on the tower, you don't know, where it's come from. You don't know the previous conditions. You don't really know. You don't have a good gauge of how the tower is performing. So weekly, you should be out there and have eyes on the tower and the basin, seeing the condition of the fill, items like that. Monthly, observe and touch and listen to the tower. This is along the same lines. You just want to have eyes on the tower. Down towards the bottom, it says that observe operation of the motor, coupling, and the drive shaft, gear reducer, and fan. So monthly, you do want to go in there and actually take a hard look at your mechanical system. I think actually you want to be checking, check for gear reducer oil leaks. I'm now on the next page. Check the gear reducer for any optional oil lines to external oil dipstick or sight glass. You also want to be inspecting the louvers and the drift eliminators monthly. So as I mentioned, the louvers can scale up. We call it scale in the cooling tower world. It's basically with all that air scrubbing that goes on, you'll get, it almost looks like some type of moss that'll build up on the louvers. So there's several different ways to clean the louvers. A few that I know of is you can actually take almost like a garage brush, like a garage broom, and just go in and gently rub the louvers on the side. If you have minimal scaling, that is one way to clean it. So if you do that monthly, you'll probably be okay for a long time. If the buildup's kind of aggressive and it's hard to just remove with the broom, you can actually get a pressure washer and put it on a very low setting and actually blast the louver face. If you put it on a high setting, you'll find out that PVC film fill isn't very thick, so you'll actually end up tearing through some of that fill. So put it on a very low pressure setting and you can clean the louvers that way. Have you heard of any other ways to clean the louver face, Larry?
A lot of people using chemicals.
All right.
All right, so back on the fill, USC decided that they're familiar with the Marley type of tower and they wanted a catwalk to make it easier for you guys to clean the fill. So the towers you guys received are double stacked, what we call double stack. So it'll be basically one, it looks like two towers stacked together, but it's just taller fill. It's, you know, it's one of the larger towers. So for that reason, you guys have a catwalk that runs in front of the 3 cells on both sides. That way you guys can have easier access. Plus you guys can look inside your cold water, what we call a cold water basin. That's very important for you guys to look inside because that's where you'll find leaves. Actually, a lot of the algae growth happens in that area. Also on the hot water basin because the water's warmer, it's coming in at your set point of 95. So your set point is, you know, middle of summer's coming in at 95. We've got covers here, which we ask that you guys keep covered a lot. A lot of times we find that they're open. There's a lot of leaves. There's a lot of debris that gets in there. So make sure that you get covered. There's nothing going to happen if you leave it open, but debris doesn't get in there, animals, whatever, birds, and that's where a lot of the mold starts to grow, algae starts to grow and stuff like that. So you guys should be very careful because that's where that's where all the water gets introduced to the tower, and that's where your fill's going to get affected. So.
Yeah. One other note on the, I like, Larry, you're going through the components. That's good. One other note on the hot water basins. Those should be checked out maybe once every other month, and what you'll see is there will get silt develop around those nozzles, and they can actually plug the nozzles if there's enough silt buildup. What we'll see a lot of maintenance individuals do is, you know, take like a broomstick and start going around and shoving the silt out of those nozzles. They'll just go, you know, they'll almost like whack-a-mole. What you have to be careful of is underneath those nozzles, there's a little, it's like almost like a flower distributor, and the water will hit that distributor and it will spray it across the fill and have proper distribution. If you're just going in and you're whacking in those holes as hard as you can to get that silt debris out of there, there's a good chance that you'll break those flowers. And once you do that, the water is just going to pour straight down, and that could actually damage the fill because you have high pressure water on the fill. You're not going to get proper distribution, so you're going to have air channeling, which would cause higher scaling. So what we recommend is, yeah, we can use a broom to go around and clean those nozzles, but just lightly put it in the nozzle orifice. Once it stops you probably hit a flower, so just pull up and go to the next one. What else do we have? What's that?
Oh, you want to just hit the components too, the gear drive. I don't know if you guys are familiar with gear drives versus belt drive. That's always a controversy with a lot of people. You guys basically have a gear drive, which in our opinion is the better option to go with because you don't have to touch belts, shivs, anything. But I think you guys bought an all stainless tower, so you get a 5-year warranty on the tower for the components and all that stuff. So this gear drive, we still recommend you check the oil it's on there.
So yeah, so you want to be checking oil, we go to our cooling tower Bible.
Once, I think monthly.
Check oil monthly, but with the gear reducers, our gear reducers, if you see on page 25, the gear reducer models are designed for 5-year oil change intervals. So all you're doing is you're observing the gear reducer to make sure there's no leaking in the pinion seal, and you're checking the oil. Other than that, you won't be really doing any work on that for 5-year intervals, which is fantastic.
5-year intervals. At that point, we also use a full synthetic oil in our gear drive. So I mean, we have that in stock at DMG. So if you guys are ever going to do a 5-year oil change, which is when we recommend it, oil's available at any time. So everything else is pretty much maintenance-wise. I mean, a lot of it is checking. If you guys check the towers, that's like he said, that's the biggest problem we see with maintenance on the tower. It's rare that the fan blades ever go out of pitch or loosen up or anything, but that's something, I don't know if it's called out in there, how often the blades should get torqued.
It's good to every so often check your blades just to make sure that the bolts are tight. So over time they can get loose, and you're not going to just have a fan blade fly off and hit a building. That's not going to happen. But if your bolts get loose, you might have your pitch adjusted. You're not going to be able to have the performance. So your motors are going to be working harder.
Vibration.
Switch will probably trip
And the vibrate, and then,
Yeah.
and then you guys will have to go out there and do more work. So yeah, it's good to check those bolts pretty regularly in the mechanical.
And your O&M, if you guys want it on disc, I'll get it to you on disc. But your O&M has actual specific blade pitch. So if you guys ever were to re-pitch the blade, or something were to happen to the motor where you have to take the fan out or anything like that, you're going to re-pitch the blades. All that information is specific to your guys' tower. So if the angle is set at 9.2 degrees or something like that, it's specific to that tower. It's not a standard. So, but everything is in the manuals. It's actually, to reproduce them other than Marley, because they give you, what, 1 or 2 paper ones, to reproduce them in that order is a real pain in the butt, because I've had to do it. The contractor lost it, and they gave it to the owner. The owner says, I didn't get it, whatever. But I had to reproduce it, and he wanted it in the exact order. So I basically ordered a new one from Marley. Like I said, they're specific to your tower. So if you guys lose it, let me know. I'll send you guys all the files on a disc, and then you guys can just reproduce it or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I do want to hit on, you mentioned that you were going to sequence these towers such that a different, and I might be wrong, a different cell is offline each week.
Yes.
Okay. So then there will be a lot of, we call them seasonal shutdowns, but you will have operational shutdowns every week. And when you do that, we suggest that you completely drain your basin.
No, that's.
Okay.
I think the sequencing is just a lead and lag, right? It's not off. It doesn't necessarily mean the tower is going to be off except in the winter, right? I mean, maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
The PEP sand filter will stay
Okay.
functioning
Yeah.
the whole time, and the equalizing line will stay open.
Okay.
Right.
I don't know if that helps at all.
This
but-
is not Kansas City.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
Is
So.
that for the stagnant water, Spencer? Is that what
Yes,
you're talking about?
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah, I was gonna get into a big Legionella speech, but you guys.
You guys are familiar.
Yeah, okay, I get you. So yeah, so maybe for your winter shutdown, if your tower's offline for a week, yeah, that's probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
If it's
Never off.
if.
It's never off at all.
Yeah, because you guys are running water through them, pretty much.
Oh, okay, you're
Yeah.
just turning the.
Just
Okay.
anything
Alright.
else? Any questions, comments?
Between the motor and the gear, there is a flexible coupling between the motor and the gearbox. And so when
Correct.
you recommend having a spare part there.
Yes.
Testing? Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Really?
It's a hospital, so.
Yeah.
Any other spare parts you'd recommend for on-site?
Well, the spare parts we recommend on this is really, I don't think there's anything, because you have a gear drive. I would say if it was a belt drive, have extra belt shivs, all of that. But we actually, it sucks for Marley, but we actually don't sell that many parts, replacement parts, only when it's a refurbishment. And but most everything, the gear drive, like he says, I mean, we've replaced gear drives on 30-year-old towers. That's just poor maintenance. And we've replaced them on 4-year towers because of the maintenance. The key on is checking the oil. Just like you drive your car, you go get an oil change. Maybe nowadays people don't check their oil as often because they're used to the dealer. But it's very important to check the oil only because of leaks. Something happens, vibration, things happen. You run that gear drive dry, you're just going to lock it up, just like everything else. And the lead time on a gear drive is about 3 to 4 weeks. So keep that in mind if you guys are operational. We could probably get them built quicker on an emergency or something like that, but it's not something we sell a lot of, so I wouldn't recommend, especially you guys having 3 towers. Don't have a failure and then say, Larry, you said we'll never need it. But it's just rule of thumb. That's why the gear drive has become so popular for us, is because of the lack of maintenance needed, versus a belt drive.
Yeah.
There's no issues with going low speeds with your drive, getting oil, really.
No.
It all comes with the design for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually the only manufacturer that builds their own gear reducer. So the good news is that it's made for the cooling tower industry. It's made for these conditions. But yeah, as Larry mentioned, these aren't something that you'll be able to call, depot and get within a few days. This will be a little bit longer lead time. So a spare might be something to consider with a 3-cell installation.
Yep.
And is your guys the same on each side?
Yes,
Should be, yes.
they are the same, yeah. The towers were identical.
Typical. What's the lead time on a 75 horsepower motor?
Lead time, if Baldor has them in stock, if you want it from Marley, Marley has them in stock. Just keep in mind, Marley uses a severe duty motor, so if you're gonna replace it with something else, make sure it's like for like. You know, I know a lot of guys replace them with Baldor motors, you know, premium efficiency, TEFC, which is, but that may not be the proper motor because of the amount of moisture and humidity in there. It may fail prematurely. It may last you 5 years, but you know, Marley does use a severe duty motor, so just keep that in mind. Any questions? Anything else?
Dealing with splashing over the top, you guys gonna look at the, kind of adjust that at all, or see we're splashing over?
That was taken care of by Marley, man.
Yeah.
Come out there.
At startup,
No, just when, 2 weeks ago went over there and it was splashing out, and it was calcium building up to the, on the outside of the tower, kind of dribbling over, and I made a comment to Ben, and Ben was gonna, have somebody look at it, I don't know if anybody did.
Okay.
We started getting really frustrated for the areas where it's kind of splashing out.
we're splashing out at the top, or
It was coming out the top and then just splashing out, which was causing,
but coming out of the top of the tower or the top of the fill?
Top part of the fill.
Okay, top part of the fill.
You just needed to be, tack that in or something.
Okay. I'm here. You want me to go look at it? I'd be happy to.
It's on the other campus. And
It's okay if I can get in. I'd
it's
like.
probably somebody-
I could show you where it's, I don't know if it's locked, I'm gonna be going to that campus later on, I could show them where it's at.
It is locked in. But I can,
Yeah, that's why I thought, if we got an idea, I could go ahead and go.
Okay, I could go now. As soon as we're done here, I'd like to go check it out. I mean,
it's
it,
good
it,
in here.
Not
Somebody needs
a,
to-
not a good photo day though. Hopefully it's not raining.
that's all right.
It's
Well, I like.
raining
you're
all
all-
the time.
Yeah, exactly. I go over there, I come out all wet. See, you found the water. No, it's the rain. All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah,
Definitely.
okay.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right.
Appreciate it, Larry.
Thank you for the time.
All right, guys. Hey, my name is Adrian Menendez. I'm here with South Coast Mechanical. I'm certified starter for Danfoss, Yaskawa, and ABB drives. So I'm pretty familiar with all your guys' drives. I'm going to talk about your guys' drives and answer any questions you guys might have. I was also here for the pre-commissioning checklist, so I was able to work with all the vendors and all the contractors. So I kind of know a little bit about this project. So you guys have the FC 102 drive. I think everyone here is familiar with drives, right? Is anyone not familiar with drives? You guys all know how they work. I think so. Yeah, you guys get the signal coming in from the automation system, whatever Honeymoon requested them. They ramp up and down depending on the scale you guys want, you know? So I think you guys are set to like 0 to 60, right? On your guys' scale? 0 to 60, yeah. Yeah, I don't think you guys are gonna have to scale it up higher than that. I think before you guys ever do that, I would recommend you check in with the manufacturer if they're okay with that. You know, I know certain fans, I'm not sure what Marley's max RPM is on your guys' gearbox, you know? Because I know he asked about the minimum, because I've seen that in the past where some manufacturers have a minimum to make sure they get proper lubrication. Some of them have a maximum though as well. So if you guys ever need, yeah, so before you guys decide to increase the RPM on this thing, or I would check with your manufacturer, make sure they allow for the extra RPMs. But this drive is capable of doing that. I think these drives I found to be very reliable. What I've come across the most is whenever they do fail, I've had them with dust intrusion. Since they all have cooling fans, they all end up bringing in some kind of dust. And typically guys never ever blow them out. So usually I've seen that if the guys blow them out every 6 months, tying up all the connections, make note of any kind of overtemp, you're gonna have reliable service out of the drives, 10 to 15 years. The other thing that might take out the drives is the motor going off on ground fault. And a lot of times the technicians will come out and they'll disable the ground fault option, still turn on the drive, and take out the drive. Then you still got to change out the motor. Other than that, I found these drives to be extremely reliable. So,
Every 6 months.
I would say every 6 months, blow them out, tighten up the connections. If you guys already have a contract already with an infrared company, electrical company, to come out there and infrared your guys' panels, since you guys have those MCC panels right there, you guys might already have a contract with someone that's gonna come out there and do the infrared. You go ahead and have them do the drives. Have them infrared the drives.
Infrared, you want to do annually though, correct?
Yeah.
Yearly?
Yeah, do those annually, whatever you guys already have as your guys' facility protocol. I would do that. And I found them to be very reliable. A lot of times, or what I have found is when the drive trip's on ground fault, the technician will just put in a bypass, and then they'll end up blowing out the bypass components. That's usually the technician, doing that. They didn't make the motor before they went ahead and did that. So if you guys have any questions, that's pretty much it. You guys pretty much all got this one covered, from what I've noticed. You guys good? All right.
Thanks, Aiden.
Thanks.